Fire away.
Well, let me hit record. Okay, now fire away. Take one. Go for it.
Hey, this is Chase Tuning from everforwardradio.com, and you're listening to Vroom, Vroom, Veer with Jeff Smith, reminding you to live a life ever forward.
Too good. You have to fuck it up a little bit. All right, brother, thanks. I'm going to hit stop. I'll be right back.
All right.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom Vroom Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Mark Aylward, thank you so much for being on Vroom Vroom Veer and welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going great, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I looked at your little pitch and I was like, oh, I think I went to your About page, right? And I kept reading and I found myself laughing on several occasions. I was like, okay, that's a yes.
Cool. You know, it's funny when I put that About page together, I know this is going to entertain some people and it's also going to
piss off
bother
people.
some people.
That's perfect. That's
Yeah.
perfect. That's one of my like filters again. Like there's the beer test, right?
Yeah.
But there's this other test, like what you just said. If you just be authentically you, like maybe overtly more you, right? You're either going to piss somebody off or attract them, right? It's binary. They're either going to run away going, that guy's an asshole, I never want to talk to him again. Or you're going to go, hey, let's have a beer. Okay, so you're at 7pillarsglobal.com. Talk a little bit about what you're most excited about in your business over there today.
Yeah, I'm in development. I'm transitioning from a career track as a recruiter, owner, operator of technical staffing companies. And of course, you can well imagine how many people I've helped find work and trained up and become successful. And when my kids came to me when they graduated from school and said, "Can you help me find a job?" And I, took them through the ringer on that. And then I helped them start their own companies as well. And they all said to me, "Dad, you know stuff that no one else is teaching. You got to figure out a way to get this in front of more people." So I'm in the transition between placing people and assisting people in career transition, which you come to find out that everyone is in career transition pretty much all the time.
Right.
And I help people dream bigger. I help people think of possibilities they never thought of before. And what that looks like is turning into a program of coaching that I can productize, which I'm in the process of right now. So it's not just me trading time for money.
Good idea.
Which is fun, but it's not scalable. It's not tenable.
It's basically making a job for yourself.
Yeah, pretty much.
You don't need another job.
No. And I've been unemployable for a long time, so we're not doing that either.
Good for you.
So it's exciting and a little frustrating. I'm a little impatient with it because I'm not an online guy. I'm a brick and mortar guy.
Gotcha.
But I got 3 young adult children that have been bolstering my efforts, so it's all good. It's all good.
It's funny. We started this conversation with like, what's the difference between a boomer and a Gen Xer? And, like my brother and sister, technically boomers. I'm a Gen Xer, right? About the only difference is a Gen Xer might be a little bit more tech savvy. Yeah. But not guaranteed. I know plenty of Gen Xers that are just Luddites to the core.
Yeah. Well, in my technical staffing career, what I was focused on was information technology. So I have had the pleasure of talking to some really significantly talented technical people over the years and watch as the technology evolves and the learning curve jacks up, but my kids can all type 80 words a minute and they've never taken a typing class. So that's, it's nuts.
I have a funny story that goes with typing class that I've mentioned a bajillion times, but it's worth repeating because it's hilarious. So remind me later. But this is about you. Yeah, this is about you. So let's go back in time and talk a little bit about like you younger. So where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in a town called Winchester.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Good spot.
Yeah.
Lots of trees. Shitty traffic.
Yeah. The traffic sucked.
Yes,
but
it does.
It was a wonderful white picket fence upbringing. I was pretty naive until college about the world in general. But
me too.
Don't regret it at all. It was a blast.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize, just like you and I growing up about the same time, the world was a little bit more idyllic. I mean, we ran around and no parental supervision. It was great.
Yeah, I've got visions of just, on Saturday in particular, there was 3 places that I could possibly be other than a friend's house. And that was the baseball park, the cemetery for riding skateboards, or down by the pond, which was next to the tennis courts. Nice. And no cell phones, just a bike. And you come back for dinner at 6. And if my parents wanted me, they just make the triangle in the car and they'd find me,
I got back. Actually, I went to see my parents in Michigan in June, and we were driving by the mall, and the mall is probably one of the longer drives that we do, and it's not far, right? We're talking about I don't know, maybe 5-6 miles, maybe 8, 10. I don't know how far it is. But it's a very small area, it's like Upper Peninsula, Northeast Wisconsin.
Nice.
And I told my parents oh yeah, I remember when I had my Schwinn, Hans and Scott and I would ride our bikes out here and we used the back way. And they were like, you did?
Yeah.
They were thoroughly unaware.
You know what, Jeff? I don't think my children walked to school one time.
Yeah.
I was in order to ride the bus, you had to live 2 miles or more away. And I think I was 1.9. So I walked 2 miles, almost 2 miles back and forth
in the
pretty
snow,
much every
uphill
day.
Both ways. Yes.
Yeah. Like it was nothing.
Right. Right. I had it pretty easy. Cause small town, my longest walk was middle school, but it wasn't hard. It was pretty easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my elementary school was really close and high school was super close. Right there. We could go home and screw around at my house for lunch and play video games. Yeah.
Yeah. And I couldn't do that. We were, you had to play in the family, you had to play a sport, have a job, or be in an extracurricular program of some kind. Those were your 3 options after school. And I was a sports guy. So I just, after practice, walked home for dinner.
I like it. Yeah. That works. Okay. So did you end up going to college or did you go right into work?
I did. I went to college. I didn't want to go to college, but back then it was, if you had the means and the grades, it was an expectation, at least in my world. And so
if your parents went to college, then you probably went to college, right?
My father went to college for a year, and the Navy came around in between World War II and Korea looking for people that wanted to be pilots. And he raised his hand and became a fighter pilot and left school and never went back.
Okay.
So and my
he
mother
an enlisted pilot? Is that a thing?
Yeah. He went down to Pensacola for fighter pilot training and ended up being number 1 in his class and had a full career with TWA as a commercial airline pilot.
That's awesome.
And my older brother was an F-15 fighter pilot as well. So the aviation was, and my mother met my father when she was a stewardess with TWA.
Flight attendant. You have to say flight attendant.
Back when they called them stewardesses.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you do in college? Was it like Animal House or did you really study?
No, I didn't get out of it what I could have gotten out of it. I got a lot out of it. I met some really great people and I went to a phenomenal institution. I went to the University of Notre Dame. And so there were people there from all over the world. And I was the dumbest guy on campus, having been one of the smarter people in high school. And
that's always physically,
there were some really smart people there and really eclectic group of people. But and a prideful place. There was a lot of pride in the football program and the basketball program. So that was a lot of fun. And I had some really great teachers. So it's not that I didn't get anything out of it, but I didn't apply myself in hindsight as I did as an older adult, which, hey, I didn't know too many people that knew what they wanted to do when they were 17.
No.
So I've forgiven myself.
Yeah. I'm kind of glad, like, I went like high school, and then I had all signed up for like college classes at the community college. I was ready, enrolled, and I went to tell the Air Force recruiter that I wasn't going to join. And he was sick that day, and his supervisor was there. And his supervisor was a really good salesman. And 20 years later, I retired from the Air Force.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for your service. Isn't it incredible? And I talk to people a lot about, career transitions, and that brings personal discussions in and motivations and what you like to do and, what's important to you and all that. And I find myself all the time, Jeff, saying, you think back and you're like, these little forks in the road,
right?
Like that thing you just mentioned there, you take a left and your life is completely different.
Totally
you take a right,
different.
totally.
Right.
And they're most of them are circumstantial, coincidental, random.
Right. Serendipity, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We like to think we've actually planned this shit out, and
not at all. Yeah. I went through this whole thing about like all the different little twists and turns with a buddy, like there was this really weird story about how, so I worked, I think it was what base? I was in Florida at Tyndall Air Force Base.
Okay.
And I was one of the guys in the sort of like wing staff, right? And there was another guy in the wing staff. He was in the history office, but for whatever reason, I had to talk to him randomly, like you said. And we're just sitting there, right? And I'm going, oh, you're a staff sergeant too, and I'm a staff sergeant. Where do you hang out? What do you do after work, right? Because I don't know, we're killing time. And he's like, oh, I'm really into investing. Are you into investing? And that little moment, right? Of, I don't even know you.
Yeah.
And I saw him like maybe like 2 or 3 times there at Florida. And he was like, you got to do this. You got to do that. You got to do this. And I was like, okay. And I went out and did all those things. And years later, I saw him in Saudi Arabia, like around 2002, 2003. And he's like, hey, how's your investments going? And I'm like, I'm kicking ass.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Right?
Well, that's another thing that I try to teach people, and I've been mentored. Very fortunately, I have been a mentor quite frequently. I love teaching and training and mentoring. I tell you, you just got to pay attention. Sometimes you just got to pay attention, to the signs, to a voice. And I think the kids nowadays, I sound like an old guy, but they pay too much attention to their phone and their computer. And I think they miss opportunities for things like mentorship, because that guy literally changed your life with a statement.
Yeah, exactly. Like more like a question.
Yeah.
What are you doing with your investments? And I think I had a really stupid answer, which is usually the case, right?
Yeah.
There was this,
you took action, though.
I did.
Yeah.
And then this other guy, what was it? I was about to get out when I was in Hawaii. So this was probably like around 1994. And I was like, oh, I'm done with the military, right? And, I talked to this captain, just random dude, never met him again in my life. I think he was an Army captain. And I saw him in like the club or a bar or something. And he was like, so what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm going to get out and I'm going to go to college in California. And he's like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just kind of bored with the military. And he's like, okay, so how are you going to pay for that? I'm like, I don't know. How much debt do you have? Oh, I have this much credit card debt. Oh, you're a dickweed. You need to re-up because you're stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who the fuck are you? And then I went back and I went, wow, he's right.
Yeah.
So I re-upped. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my father, my uncle, my nephew, both my brothers, all military, Navy and Air Force, and it's one of the things I kind of regret. Because it did so much for them. It was so they have access to so many people now, and they've got the benefits and the pensions and the education and the travel.
Yeah, it is like the world's biggest travel agency, airline.
Yeah.
You could also call it like a travel club.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's I thank you for your service, by the way. I
no worries. It was fun.
I'm a big fan of the military.
So, okay. You study college. What did you study in college? We didn't say. Not much, but I get it.
Intramural basketball.
Okay.
I got a BBA in marketing. I studied marketing.
Oh, marketing. Yes.
Yeah. And my guidance counselor in high school said you should go to a good school and get a business degree and go to work for a big company. And I always think back and my adult self says, you have no fucking idea who I am. What are you giving me that advice for? How do you know that's right for me? But it was the common theme, and she was well-intentioned, right? But I tell that story a lot when I'm coaching people, because it's like the first thing I do when I'm coaching people is like, whatever you're thinking about what you're possibly able to do next, blow it up into an enormous dream. Take the shackles off yourself.
Make it really big, right?
Make it really big, and make it something that you had no idea that this was even available to you.
Right.
That's step one.
Totally. I kind of get that, though. It's like if you're a guidance counselor and you've got whatever, right? Like 250, 500, 800 kids that you have to tell them what to do next.
Yeah.
We now know that's not a good system. It's obviously not a good system.
Right.
But I mean, unless you're like super math guy or super science guy or some obvious, okay, you're an athlete, so do this, right? Why not say, oh, get a business degree, work for a big company? I mean, I get it. It's like the generic answer.
Yeah, no, it's just an interesting, because I've been able to watch over the years the evolution of how companies hire and how people get jobs, and it's dramatically changed. And
it's getting better, I think.
Yeah, well, it's getting there. You got more choices, and I tell people as candidates for whatever, you have the ability to dictate some of the terms and working conditions, because you don't just plug into a cubicle anymore.
No. Right.
You might if you want to, but you don't have to. Exactly. And that begins this conversation just becomes wide open, and people start to get epiphanies as they start thinking about the possibilities that they never thought of before.
Right. I just I listened to this podcast with Tim Ferriss.
Oh yeah.
There's this I think it's called Maui Nui. It's like this business in Hawaii on Maui where they go out and they're hunting these deer that are invasive species on Maui, right? And then the business is to sell that meat. But really what they're trying to do is control that population. But the guy that's doing the business is doing this sort of like, as he's hiring people, he's explaining their eval system. And it's this sort of like 360 peer review thingy that I'd heard of, but it sounded like bullshit. But the way he described it, it was amazing. I was like, because not only is he holding all the employees accountable, for all these different, dimensions, but he's holding himself and his managers accountable to the same program. Which I thought was awesome. I was like, so a lot of people don't even want the job once they hear like, okay, like on the second interview, here's the standard you have to meet. And they're like, well, they never call back.
Yeah. Well,
that's a good thing though.
It is. My experience is most people don't like being held accountable. And, I think that's an interesting thing. It's one of the things my favorite question in an interview for hiring a sales rep is, what's the most difficult thing that's ever happened to you, and how did you come out the other side? And then you just shut up and listen. And they tell you everything you need to know, and you can make a decision at the end of that answer to that question for
Right.
the most part.
Did they own it? Did they squirm out of it? Did they deny?
Yeah. No, one of my favorite jokes is like, well, so why'd you leave your last job? Oh, my boss was an asshole. How about the job before that? My boss was an asshole. And the one before that, another asshole. I think you're the asshole. You know?
There's a common thread. It's you.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's
So
right.
what was your first job out of college?
So I went to work for Metropolitan Life Insurance Company in
Oh, nice.
Chicago, and I worked in the 67th floor of what was then the Standard Oil Building.
Wow.
And they bought a few suits and got a credit card and started trying to sell large group insurance, so more than 200 employees whose companies around the city.
Okay. B2B stuff. Right.
Yeah, I couldn't stand it. I hated it. I was really enjoying Chicago. I was really enjoying the 67th floor of the Standard Oil Building and the food and the sports and but I wasn't my feet weren't on the ground. I was just fucking around. And I did that I did that for about 3 years, and then I was missing my home, so I moved back to Boston, and then a whole nother series of events took place, including impregnating my girlfriend, then marrying her, having 2 more kids, and moving down to Florida. That happened over the span of about 3 years back in Boston.
Okay.
And then it ended up in Florida, and I had been put in touch with a gentleman who became my mentor, and he interviewed me for a half day, because as soon as I found out my girlfriend was pregnant and we agreed to stay together and raise the child and get married, I said, okay, no more fucking around.
Now I'm not fucking around.
Now you don't have that option anymore.
Right.
And so I sought out work, a vision, and it became recruiting. I answered an ad. My mom's best friend remarried this guy, and he was an Australian, and they were at the condo, my folks' condo, and I walked in one day, still like, I got to find something to do. I got to find something to do. And this guy, over a glass of wine, I asked him, so what do you do? May I ask what you do for a living? I'm curious professionally. I'm trying to find my way.
Right.
And he said, well, I'm a recruiter for petrochemical engineers in Saudi Arabia. And I said, well, let's unpack that. Like, what the hell does that mean?
What the hell does that mean? Petrochemical
and he told me, and it was
engineers.
like,
okay.
This guy, he's Saudi Arabia. The only people that want to live in Saudi Arabia are Saudi Arabians. So they go outside of Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Yeah. And they find people from all walks of life that are petrochemical engineers in the oil and gas industry.
Okay.
And they sign them to 3-year engagements, and they give them 4 or 5 times the money they would make in the United States. They give them a free house,
right?
And they pay all their expenses,
right?
And I said, well, how do you get paid? He said, I get a percentage of their starting salaries. I said, what does that end up? And he said, well, it's usually per candidate. It's usually about $100,000. And I
you don't
opened
need
up
many candidates.
No, I opened up the Boston Globe and looked for recruiting jobs, and I responded to one, and I went in the following Monday, and they hired me on the spot, and that's how I began my recruiting career.
Wow. So the way I think of recruiting is like sales to people, right? So like remember that story about the recruiter that was really good? So like the Air Force recruiting school is probably one of the top sales schools in the country, you know?
I bet
their recruiting system is really good. I mean, it always struggles when based on economic and everything else, but he was awesome. I mean, he just saw me for like 5 minutes and he was like, "Oh, I know what this guy wants. He wants to get the hell out of Dodge."
Well, it's interesting. There's lots of different types of recruiting, and I think that not that the Air Force doesn't go out and to schools and stuff and seek people out, but
it's casting a wide net. Yeah,
yeah. Most of the people that the Air Force recruiters are talking to are coming to them. Mm-hmm. In the commercial world,
correct.
Nobody comes to you. You have to go find them.
Right.
So it's a substantially different operational logistical setup. And then there's permanent recruiting and there's contract recruiting. And in contract recruiting, someone's dedicated to developing the client relationship, and another person is dedicated to developing the candidate relationship, and they interact together to close deals and set up interviews and stuff like that. And the permanent work, it's a full desk, as they call it, and that's the person who's representing the candidates is also reaching out to the clients. So those are two distinctly different jobs, distinctly different jobs. I did them all before I started my own business. So I had experience in all three of those operational areas. And then when I started my own business after my mentor sold his business that I helped him build, I pretty much was ready from the ground up. I knew almost everything there was to know about starting and scaling a technical staffing business. And I did it with a partner of mine, a good friend of mine. And we were wildly successful until my divorce came. And that's another chapter.
Let's put a pin in that, because I have follow-up questions, because you said you were doing tech staffing. So
yes.
So that's mostly like, so they were like IT people or engineers or a little bit of both?
There was back then it was information technology and software engineering were distinctly different professions. They've since kind of melded.
Not really.
A little, but
basically you're either development or operations, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Or cyber, cyber people are.
Well, there's networking and infrastructure and security.
It depends on how big your network is, really. Like if it's a small network, one person can do lots of things, but yeah.
Yep. But I was mostly in the software engineering field. So I was anybody that touched the software development lifecycle, I was capable of representing.
Okay.
And I stayed in that. Gotcha. I stayed in that groove my entire career. So I know some pretty good software engineers.
That is an interesting business now, especially because it's like, something happened and I'm not sure when, but like computer nerds became cool.
Well, they started making a shitload of money.
That's right. That's right. But so like it hurt my brain because I tell this brief story because it's funny. There was this guy on a temp job that I did. So I did a temp job in 2018 at the Air Force Base here in Vegas. And it was a really simple, very straightforward. We're just migrating, right? From whatever the hell it was. From 7 to 10, right? Trump actually mandated a certain date. And that was probably the first time I had ever heard of that in 20 years, where a president tells the services directly to say, no, you must go to 10 now. So anyway, that was my job. And one of the guys that showed up was a developer, right? Way super overqualified for the job. I mean, we weren't doing anything. Right. We just learned how, you have to run this script. Right? It's super simple. And then you do that like 900 times. Right. So it's mind-numbingly dull. Right. The actual work. So I didn't think it was going to work out anyway. But this guy was the reason I bring it up is he was a douche. Yeah. He was just like a prima donna diva douche and ended up quitting, sort of. He was about to get fired and he decided to tell everybody he quit.
That's funny.
But it's a temp job, really, who cares? You don't even have to put it on your resume. I just thought I was a little shocked. I had never met a computer nerd that was that arrogant, total over.
It's kind of like a celebrity status at least in the eyes of
other
information
IT people.
Technology.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And when you find somebody who's got social skills and a sense of humor and a deep technological background, you got an all-star. You got an all-star.
Exactly. Somebody that can talk to anybody.
Yep.
Like both sides of the conversation. Here's a customer and here's a bunch of nerds behind you.
That's right.
Can you stand between them and speak both languages? Yes.
Well, it's interesting, many things about it. It's been a really interesting seat to have for 35 years, to watch technology evolve through the eyes of people that are actually implementing and utilizing the technology and creating these really cool solutions to really complex problems, whether it's integration or automation or both.
Right.
I remember it being in Boston when the software startups in the late 80s started popping. Most of them failed, but some of them blew up, like multi-million, creating millionaires all over the place. And the legal community in Boston had to make a conscious decision in these big, expensive mahogany offices with $2,000 suits.
Sure.
And they're having guys walk in with ponytails and Aerosmith T-shirts on, and the legal community stopped wearing jackets and ties like overnight.
Wow. Just like that. It's like,
yeah.
they had to flip the switch.
Yeah. They didn't quite go to ponytails and Aerosmith T-shirts, but they dropped the ties and jackets. That was funny.
You know who will never go conservative are bankers, and specifically bankers from Asia. Just maybe you got two conservative groups, joining hands, saying
That's
we're
funny.
going to still dress nice.
Yeah.
I did a temp job in LA for it was basically the government bank of Singapore. Funny story. They use the government treasury and invest it in movies in Hollywood. I didn't know that. Now I know.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. They make sure they only use the most money-making producers. So they don't want anybody with no losers. You can't have a loser on your record.
Well, I'm sure you've discovered, and I marvel at this all the time. There are so many people making so much money doing things I've never heard of before. And so many people making so much money that I've never heard of before. There's just so much money.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. When you hear stories like that, like I had always thought oh, wouldn't it be great to be in the entertainment industry where it's not all about money? Oh, it's totally all about money. That was one of the many little bubbles that were burst, in my life. They just keep going. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about this divorce. So what happened with that, and what was the consequence?
Yeah, it's funny, the question, what happened. It's been, I was in the court system for about 10 years to the tune of millions of dollars.
Ouch.
And I ended up getting custody of my 3 kids who were just young teenagers at the time, as my own attorney, and I'm not an attorney.
Gotcha.
So you can just imagine how crazy the situation had to be for a man to get custody of his kids, sole custody, and to do it pro se as his own attorney without representation. There's so many stories, Jeff, from that. There was no one event. I think ultimately I married a woman who had a really, really difficult childhood. And when it came time, and we all face this midlife crisis of whatever it's called,
Right.
Some guys get Corvettes and wigs, and women get plastic surgery.
Right.
This was way more than that. She refused to acknowledge her demons, and I became her target. And
ouch.
there was nothing I could do about it. I tried. I think we went to 6 or 7 tries at marriage counseling with 6 or 7 counselors, and third or fourth visit, every time when we start to talk about her, she'd get up and scream and walk out. And I would look at the new psychologist and say, "What do I do with that, doc?" And nobody had an answer for me. So
wow.
There's so much more detail to it. And most of it's funny stories now, because some of the shit that happened was you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe it if I told you.
Okay.
But the kids are doing great now. Everybody's adjusted. They had to deal with their abandonment issues because she abandoned them for 10 years, didn't talk to any of them, and then came back into their lives a few years ago. And I was worried what would happen again. And she lasted about 2.5 years, and then she blew up one day and took off. And I don't think any of my kids know where she is right now.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was crazy. It was fucking nuts is what it was.
Batshit crazy.
Yeah, it was. I used to tell my lawyer, I'm not looking to win the trophy for the worst divorce you've ever seen. So stop saying that.
Well, good for you that you didn't have to pay somebody so much money.
Well, I lost everything. I paid all of my money to everybody. So
okay, well, never mind then. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry,
but
that's usually how it works out. You got the important thing. You got the kids. I
got the important thing, and I think that I got to see I was mom and dad for 10 years. I got to see everything. I went to everything. I went to every dance recital, every volleyball game, every practice, every little league game.
Right.
Met all the
that's
teachers, knew the principal really well at the high school. Everybody knew who I was. And I can't honestly say I would have had opportunity if things stayed together. I think we would have probably separated the tasks like most couples do. And I probably would have, I don't know. I had to sell my company unwillingly because I was the momentum guy. And when you lose the momentum guy, you lose the momentum. Right. And she stuck her nose in my business, talking to employees and clients and sending letters. And it just really, my partner said to me one day, one of them said to me one day, I can't do this anymore. And I said, well, we agreed at the beginning. If one of us wants to punch, then there's two options. We buy you out or we sell the company and split the proceeds. So that's what we chose to do. And we sold it to the wrong people and we got an earn out, and I'd never do an earn out again. And
what's an earn out? Does that mean you have to work?
We'll give you this much money right now. And then if you meet these goals over the next 12 and 24 months, you'll get another couple of chunks of change.
Okay.
And for anybody that's selling a company,
don't do that.
I would not advise because what you don't have, Jeff, is after you sell the company, you're no longer in control of your destiny. And what we discovered with this company was we had an Orlando office and a Boston office. They didn't tell us, but they didn't want the Orlando office. They just wanted the Boston office to service their largest customer in the financial services space, which I won't name.
Right.
But it's one of the biggest banks in the world. And so they went about diffusing the efficacy of the Orlando office, saying no to contracts and no to clients and no. They fired my right-hand guy. Unbeknownst to me, one day they just showed up and fired him.
Right.
I went nuts. And so you're taking my ability to meet my earnout out of my pocket. Like, what are you doing?
You have no power. Right. Yeah.
I had no power. And so we didn't do due diligence on the culture. We did due diligence on the financials. And so that would be a piece of advice I'd give to anybody that's contemplating selling a company. You have to do diligence on the culture and environment just as much as the financials.
Yeah. It had you known they were going to try to kill the other office.
It would have been a completely different deal or no deal at all.
No deal, probably.
On top of that all, it's not like I got my momentum back after I sold the company. I was still in the middle of all the shit.
Right.
So it was pretty taxing, but I have fantastic relationships with all three of my children and they're all doing great. So I don't have any regrets. And when I think I haven't really thought of her in a long time, other than when she comes up when I'm on a podcast and somebody asks me about it.
Sorry.
No. It's a fascinating topic. It's an
story,
interesting topic.
right?
I learned a lot.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of good stories maybe for another time. But yeah, when I think about regret, I think, you know what? If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have my 3 kids. So let's just leave it at that, you know? And when I talk to myself about it, that's what I say. Just leave it at that, Mark. That's where it ends.
And you know, you wouldn't be who you are now if that hadn't happened, right? So you can't go and like second guess these things.
No,
it all sort of just happens for a reason. The tough bullshit that you have to go through, it just makes you stronger, right?
Everybody goes through something, man. Everybody goes through something. I constantly reminded myself, dude, you want to find somebody who's doing worse off than you, look to your left or look to your right. That's all you got to do.
Right.
You know,
That's right. You're right. You're right. You know, I went through a phase, like after I retired from the military, for maybe a couple years, I went through that midlife crisis.
Yeah.
And so I didn't buy a Corvette and I didn't get divorced and find a 20-something with a boob job or anything, but I thought about it. Yeah. And what I came to the conclusion was sure, I could get a divorce, but am I going to find somebody better because she's pretty awesome?
Yeah.
Right. And the answer was no. So it's more one of those things where you just have to like say, okay, being in a long-term committed relationship means you're going to accept this person's bullshit. And I can do that, right? I've accepted that. Nobody's perfect, right?
And she has to accept yours too.
Exactly.
Right?
And she's already demonstrated she's in for the long haul. We've been married 30 years.
Yeah, what's interesting is, you asked me earlier about my business. What I'm finding is this midlife crisis thing is a professional disaster as well. It's
Sure.
You left the Air Force. This cocoon that was the Air Force is like,
Right.
there's good and bad here, but I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I know the people I'm with.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you unplug from that and you're like,
Yeah.
I lost my rope. Somebody throw me a lifeline here.
You're
what
right.
the hell's going on?
Your connection is gone. It's like you get unplugged and you're like, what the fuck? Right.
Yeah. And so I find myself, because of the experience I went through, is relatively to the professional executive people that I, impart my wisdom with now. I've had enough shit that I can really help someone who's about to go through some shit or just went through some shit. It doesn't really matter if it's a health scare, a relationship ending, someone close to you dying, getting fired from a job you had for 25 years. All of these people are one day lost. Right. And it's time. I need some direction. I need some advice. I need some wisdom. I need some context. I need all of those things.
Right.
That's kind of what I'm doing now.
Right.
Because when I get into a professional discussion with someone, to do it well, relationship based, like empathetically, like giving a shit about the actual human being.
Right.
You can't help them through a professional transition without helping them through their personal transition that's directly attached to their professional transition.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's basically, they're undividable. They're the same thing, basically. Obviously you need to have a job, right? But what you're really doing is, it's like what I tell people about like my job in the Air Force. Well, no, it wasn't in the Air Force. In Department of Energy. Technically, I was an IT guy, right? So like a help desk guy, but like a little too old to be a help desk guy. And I would say to people, this is what I discovered at that DBS, that Singapore bank job. That job, I mean, I would tell people it's not really IT, because like what I'm doing was everybody in the bank office would get an email with instructions on how to like run the new software on their phone, right? And that was sent to all the users who were supposed to be able to read those instructions and do that. They either didn't want to or couldn't figure it out. And that's what I was there for, right? That's not really IT. That's just being willing to read instructions and then go, okay, I think I got it. And then go try, right? That's not IT. That's just like being convenient.
Well, it makes me think of, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn because of the nature of what I do, and have been for a while. And some recruiter yesterday, a woman who I'm connected to, shared a statistic with all the layoffs and stuff that have been going on. Obviously, people are getting redeployed, many of them. Some of them are frustrating and not. But she said, I think it was 81% of people that have gotten new jobs in the last 6 or 12 months are doing something other than what they used to do.
Wow,
80%.
That's a big number.
It's a big number. And it ties back into my initial conversation with you about getting people to open their eyes up and say, look, just because you've been a project manager in healthcare for the last 15 years doesn't mean you have to be a project manager in healthcare. And I task people with, you sit down for a couple hours, not 10 minutes, 2 hours, with a pencil and a piece of paper or an iPad or whatever you choose, and write down all of your skills, like details. And then take those skills and create a second column and move the ones over that are transferable to almost any other job. I think you're gonna find as well 80% of those skills transfer too.
Right. Right.
And you've had enough different jobs to know exactly what I'm talking about.
Totally. Yeah.
Most people don't know that, Jeff.
Yeah, I got lucky again in so many different ways because my Air Force job was very generic. You remember that TV show MASH?
Oh, yeah.
My job in the Air Force was basically Radar O'Reilly, except I wasn't in the Army. I was in the Air Force.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So you do a little bit of everything, right? You do have your job, right, that the book says is your job, but then you also have to do everything else that nobody else wants to do.
Well, you know what though?
It's great.
thinking,
it's a blessing.
I think, but you get access to all
The
different
boss.
kinds of people.
Yes.
You learn how to do all kinds of different things. You learn how to solve problems with limited resources.
There you go.
And that's what everyone's looking for. They're looking for people that can help them solve problems.
Make them look smart and figure shit out. That was, I went through this. We're getting close to wrapping up already. So like, I'm aware.
No sweat.
Okay.
No sweat.
But one more story, and then we'll get into how people can get in touch with you at 7pillarsglobal.com. But yeah, so like there was me and this logistics tech sergeant. I was a tech sergeant, and my job was, like kind of like information technology, but not really. Like a combination of admin and like, again, very generic. But like she just would come in and say, I don't know how to do this. Help me out, right? And I was like, who on the base knows how to do that? Right? Because there's always like a tether that connects back, right? And I would like, okay, let's call that person and ask them what to do. And she's like, oh yeah, good idea. And the boss came out, the commander, he said, Jeff, I figured out what you're good at. He's like, I'm like, what? He's like, you figure shit out. It's really the only skill there is on the planet, basically.
Well, you're resourceful, obviously, as well. I mean, that's part of how you figure shit out. And I can't emphasize it enough, Jeff, for anybody who's listening that's thinking about making a move of any kind. People they don't want problems; they want solutions. I used to tell my employees, you come to me with anything that you need to come to me with, problem or otherwise, but you cannot bring me a problem unless you bring me a couple of possible solutions as well.
Right.
So that I know you've thought about it, right? That you're not just coming because Mark can fix everything and everything's going to be okay. That's bullshit, right?
Thanks.
So even if we don't use one of your solutions,
right?
It's kind of like when I asked my dad what a word meant when I was a kid, he would say, "Go look it up. You'll remember it then."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same thing. Like, I don't want your checklist on how to do this process to be step one, ask Jeff. That's right.
That's right. That's right.
That's what you teach like airmen when you're an NCO, right? It's like, don't ask me. Try to figure it out. And then, and then if you need help, I'll help, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So you are again, Mark Aylward. We are now wrapping up. So you're at 7pillarsglobal.com. So how can people best get in touch with you, maybe hire you as a coach, mentor, whatever?
Yeah, the website is there's a couple of places on the website page there, the front page, where you can drop your name and email address in.
Perfect.
And you'll come to my calendar and you can grab a slot, and I usually give people 30 minutes on the house. And
nice.
That's the process we do there is you tell me what's going on, and I'll tell you whether I can help you and a little bit about how, if I think that I can. And if I can't, I'll give you at least one or two things to think about that'll probably help you, and we'll wish each other well. But it's important to me that the people that I help want to be helped by me, and we can accomplish that in 30 minutes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And my LinkedIn profile too. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. My last name's Aylward.
Right.
And the first name's Mark. So yeah, I make myself pretty easy to find given the nature of what I do. I like to be found.
Mark, this has been a blast.
Yeah, it's fun, Jeff. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I hope some of it was helpful for somebody,
Yeah, it was fun for me. It helped me. If anything, there was something I was supposed to remember and I forgot, but that's okay. Don't worry about it.
No, you wanted to pin my divorce, but we did go back to that.
Okay, good. Okay.
You said put a pin in that, and we eventually got back to it.
Perfect. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So that's perfect. Okay. So you have a good one, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Take care.
Thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.